Hi, I'm Sue Hillyard, and this presentation is recorded for the Welcome to my talk, Eclipse, Mercury, Jupiter, Atlantis, and Chaos. Combined topics are in the death charts of two prominent personalities who died shortly after the August 2018 solar eclipse. Next, the cycles of Mercury-Jupiter conjunctions, and then finally, how those cycles, combined with eclipses and the asteroids Chaos and Atlantis, correlate with known events to tell a story of the incredible hubris. Mute yourself and jump in when they come up. I would prefer not to take comments in the chat. Chances are I won't see them, but if I do, it will distract me more than I already am normally with Mercury square Uranus, which is why I have to read. When I was originally preparing to do this talk in November of last year, the sun was at the bendings, square the moon's nodes, and we were approaching the final eclipse on the Leo-Aquarius axis. So I looked at what was happening in the sky around that time. The configuration that jumped out at me was Mercury conjunct Jupiter. And this would happen 3 times, as there was a retrograde cycle of Mercury that brought it back and forth across the path of Jupiter. Interestingly, I had also been noticing the presence of Mercury and/or Jupiter in death charts. For example, in 2 prominent personalities who had died soon after the eclipse of August 11th, 2018, at 18 degrees Leo, 42 minutes, Aretha Franklin and John McCain, for both of whom I found recorded birth and published death times. Aretha, long referred to as the undisputed Queen of Soul, has the royal sign of Leo on the midheaven with its ruler, her Aries sun, in the 5th house. The solar eclipse was within 5 degrees of her midheaven on August 11th. She died on the 16th. When she died, not only Leo Mercury retrograde, transiting Leo North Node conjunct the natal Pluto Chiron midpoint, but the ruler of all of this Leo, the transiting Leo Sun, was exactly conjunct her midheaven. Let's see it up here. Her midheaven had progressed to a conjunction with her ascendant, indicating a major transition in her life. Retrograde Neptune transited conjunct her Mercury South Node and was exactly square natal Jupiter, as well as transiting Jupiter being exactly conjunct her Scorpio ascendant, all reflecting that she was adored and treated like a queen even in death, having been buried in a 24-karat gold plate casket after days of large celebrations of her life. When John McCain died, his progressed Scorpio Sun, Mercury, and Black Moon Lilith were conjunct in his 9th, with transiting Jupiter in a whole sign conjunction too, and in balsamic phase and within 12 degrees of Mercury. Neptune transiting through Pisces in his 1st house, conjunct progressed Saturn, was also square natal Jupiter. Transiting asteroid Chaos was conjunct his 4th house South Node and Chiron, having passed over them, and coincidentally, Donald Trump's sun at 22 degrees Gemini 56. But more about that later. This occurred around the time of the Great American Eclipse on 28 Leo 53. The eclipse was square McCain's progressed Mercury Sun and Black Moon Lilith, and conjunct Trump's Mars and Ascendant. Then I noticed transiting asteroid Atlantis was conjunct McCain's vertex in the 8th house of death. Progressed Atlantis just passed his Mercury, and natal Atlantis conjunct his Virgo Sun. Less than a month before his death, McCain and 2 other Republicans cast the deciding votes in the Senate to defeat their party's limited Obamacare repeal. It was a program that he didn't like, yet voted to save because he said the bill fell short of our promise to repeal and replace Obamacare with meaningful reform. At the end of his life, he had chosen to do what he believed was right for his constituents regarding their health care. Jupiter spends roughly a year in each sign as it moves around the zodiac, and Mercury stays near the sun as it goes all the way around the zodiac in a year. So chances are good that Mercury will be a retrograde of Mercury while it's in the same sign as Jupiter. They could connect 3 times that year. Such was the case in 2018, when Mercury and Jupiter met once in a late degree of Scorpio and twice in Sagittarius, one sign ruled by Jupiter. This seemed significant enough, and then something else caught my eye. Just before their second conjunction, the Sun joined the party, as did the asteroid Atlantis. It felt important, but what did it mean? To help answer that question, now let's talk about the asteroids Atlantis and Chaos. First in my chart, which is where many of my astrological journeys have begun. Years ago, I had discovered the asteroid Chaos was conjunct my north node in the 9th, and have also been following the asteroid Atlantis since I found that it was at the very bottom of my chart between my south node and its ruler Mercury. It made sense when applied to my life, in that it seemed as if I was often trying to make order out of the chaos that surrounded me. And I'd always been fascinated by the story of Atlantis. On alexasteroidastrology.com, I found this. Asteroid number 19521, Chaos, was the ancient Greek personification of the void, the first thing to exist, from which everything else emerged. There was a creative, potential-generating aspect to the original Greek usage, which in modern times has become more focused on anarchy, disorder, disarray, and confusion. Chaos is the name given to a trans-Neptunian object in the Kuiper Belt region of the solar system near Pluto. Astrologically, chaos represents unlimited potential, but also resonates strongly to its modern usage, indicating anarchic, disordered, bedlam-like situations or circumstances. Individuals with chaos strongly placed tend to attract turmoil and upheaval or create it for others. And from Zane Stein's description of asteroid Atlantis, Zip Dobbins said that the data mounting on Atlantis points to it as a key to our use of power. He states that where Atlantis falls natally shows a house where power was definitely an issue in childhood, and one's adult personality has been shaped by the way one learned to deal with this issue. If there was a great deal of difficulty in the early home life in this area, the person can grow up with stunted or underdeveloped abilities here. Usually one strives, once away from home, to gain control in the house where Atlantis falls, and then to never relinquish this control again. Yet there is also a feeling of guilt that is very strong for any failures here, often much stronger than these disappointments might warrant. Martha Lang Westcott relates the following to Atlantis. It stands leaks and negative expectations. Are there any questions about whether there are leaks in government or invasions of privacy of an official or famous person? Yeah. Are there negative projections about a leader or government official? Yep. Just look at the issues surrounding President Trump. Trump has natal Atlantis in Leo in between his 12th house Pluto and his 11th house Venus-Saturn conjunction. What does this say about what stunted or underdeveloped abilities he grew up with? Well, here are just a few keywords to help understand some possibilities. Pluto can be power. Leo is often said to be about royalty. Cancer talks about security, Venus values, and Saturn's structure. Notice also that his Venus-Saturn conjunction is conjunct the north node of Saturn, while his Pluto is within a degree of the north node of Neptune. His actions seem to be speaking to the collective. StraightWoo.com suggests that asteroid 1198 Atlantis, being related to the mythical lost kingdom of Atlantis, can also talk about excessive pride or hubris that leads to a downfall. On Wikipedia, I found that the only primary sources for Atlantis are Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. All other mentions of the island are based on them. Plato is known to have freely borrowed some of his allegories and metaphors from older traditions. This led a number of scholars to investigate possible inspiration of Atlantis from Egyptian records of the Thera eruption, the Sea People's invasion, or Trojan War. Others have rejected this chain of tradition as implausible and insist that Plato created an entirely fictional nation as his example, drawing loose inspiration from contemporary events. Aristotle believed that Plato, his teacher, had invented the island to teach philosophy. To the Greeks, hubris referred to extreme pride, especially pride and ambition so great that they offend the gods and lead to one's downfall. Hubris was a character flaw often seen in the heroes of classical Greek tragedy, including Oedipus and Achilles. The familiar old saying, "Pride goeth before a fall," is basically talking about hubris. Does any of this seem like it could apply to what's going on in current events around the world? Well, it did to me the more I examined the daily news stories. There were so many stories in the news illustrating the hubris of this administration. Anyone friends with me on Facebook probably noticed that I was posting them feverishly. I did this in part to keep track of dates and what was going on. So, in view of the definitions that include words like excessive pride or self-confidence, arrogance, self-importance, egotism, pomposity, superiority, and Martha Lang Westcott's sentiment that it represents abuse of trust, of abilities, and of inside information, we'll look at charts of a few of the players on the current political stage to see how these asteroids play into their stories. But first, let's look at the cycle of the Mercury-Jupiter conjunctions so you can see how we got to the most recent conjunction. Mercury and Jupiter both have multiple interpretations in astrology, one of which refers to travel. Traditionally, Mercury is a true one. Since many regard death as a journey, having seen Mercury and/or Jupiter involved in death charts was not surprising to me. But Mercury and Jupiter have other interpretations as well, such as those that involve communication and learning. Jupiter also tends to expand whatever it touches, and Mercury can be the trickster. In ancient astrology, they each rule 2 signs. So when Mercury and Jupiter meet, they could potentially be relaying information to us about 4 areas of the chart and topics of whichever sign hosts the conjunction. In this table, the 3 columns to the left refer to the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction, and the right column shows the position of Atlantis at the time of the conjunction. You can see that the conjunction in each sign occurs just about a year apart, mostly in subsequent signs, but occasionally at the beginning and end of one sign and skipping another. Mercury was retrograde in 2006 and 2011, so it passed over Jupiter 3 times, which you can see bracketed here in red. 2016 also had 3 Mercury-Jupiter conjunctions, as did 2018. Interestingly, in 2006, the 3-degree Sagittarius 39-minute conjunction with Atlantis calling forward to the solar eclipse on 8/11/2018 was within a degree of the 4-degree Sagittarius 19-minute conjunction in 2018. But This time, look where Atlantis was. At 5 degrees Sagittarius, 15 minutes, exactly conjunct Mercury, Jupiter, and the Sun. And the next conjunction on 12/21/18 at 9 Sagittarius 35 was within a degree of the 2016 Mars retrograde point of 8 degrees Sagittarius 54 minutes, seeming to call back to that previous sensitive point. Also calling forward to the Great American Solar Eclipse at 28 Leo 53 was the 2015 conjunction at 29 Leo 06, and the 10/18/2018 conjunction at 27 Scorpio 49 was square to the lunar eclipse on 27 Aquarius 08 earlier in the year. All of these calls forward and or calls back got me thinking, which of the players in the political game had planets or angles at these points, and what was going on back then as relates to now? As a little teaser of what's to come, Paul Manafort joined Trump's election campaign on March 29, 2016, when Mars was at 6 Sag 52, as it was slowing down just a couple of degrees from turning retrograde. His progressed Chiron is now 5 Sag retrograde. More on that in a bit. In his recent article, Celestial Cazimi of Mercury in Aquarius, Gray Crawford says there is debate amongst astrologers whether or not the superior conjunction is the actual beginning of the entire synodic cycle of Mercury, or if instead the beginning is the inferior conjunction when Mercury is retrograde. Those who prefer the superior conjunction in part use the symbolism of it being a more celestial solar union, that on the far side of the sun, the star of Hermes is experiencing a heavenly communion that sends its twilight appearance as an evening star. In contrast, the inferior conjunction of Mercury when retrograde is more earthy and chthonic, an epiphany in the underworld that seeds the heliacal rising of Mercury as a morning star. No matter your viewpoint regarding which one is the beginning of the total cycle, he says, I feel it's the inferior conjunction, and I tend to agree with him. It is important to realize that both solar unions of Mercury are rebirth moments for Mercury. So then, with Mercury and Jupiter being reborn with asteroid Atlantis, it seems appropriate that the story of hubris starts to be revealed. First, for reference, here's a table of the 2016 eclipses with North Node in Virgo and South. All of the NASA Ceros information numbers are from Bernadette Brady's book, Predictive Astrology. As you can see, the September 1st eclipse was square to the Mars retrograde and Mercury Jupiter conjunction points I just mentioned at around 9 Sag. Then in May of 2017, the North Node moved into Leo and South Node to Aquarius, so the eclipses began to occur in those signs. Here's a table of the 2017 eclipses, including the so-called Great American Eclipse at 28 degrees Leo, 53 minutes, dubbed thusly because it spanned across the entire United States, from the Pacific Northwest to the southeast on the Atlantic Ocean side of the country, cutting a wide path of totality across the entire nation. Since then, we've seen some remarkable events all across this country, from riots in Portland to extreme election fraud in North Carolina. That eclipse fell within a degree of Donald Trump's ascendant, and the February 2018 solar eclipse at 27 Aquarius 08 fell in his 7th house, directly opposite his Mars at 26 Leo 47. Meanwhile, asteroid Chaos, which moves very slowly, has been traveling back and forth across his 10th house sun and is square to his natal position in the 7th house since then. You can see it has moved only 90 degrees since 1946. So that's how slow it moves. Here are the 2018 eclipses. I had created some of these tables previously for my last 2 EA Zoom meetings. One on eclipse serocycles, the other connecting the eclipses with last year's relatively rare Mars retrograde in Aquarius. If you're interested, you can view them on the EA Zoom YouTube channel by searching for my name. In researching the Mars retrograde talk, I noticed that the lunar eclipse of 7/27/2018 made a very tight callback to the Aquarius Mars retrograde point in 1939. And here are the 2019 eclipses with North Node Cancer, South Node Capricorn. Next summer's lunar eclipse at 24 Capricorn 04/9, Mars stationary direct at 23 Cap 56, noting that on September 1st, 1939, World War II started. This made me a little uneasy in that it looks like Trump is trying very hard to start World War III right now. However, the underlying planetary configuration was a lot different then. For instance, Pluto was square the nodes then, as was retrograde Mars opposed that Pluto, which had just gone into Leo. However, that said, Pluto is now conjunct the Moon's south node, as well as his own south node, so we certainly could be revisiting the past. Hopefully it is to heal into the future, with a reminder of that time being all that is necessary, so cooler heads will prevail. In giving that Mars retrograde talk, I asked, a year from now, where will we be? Well, the nodes have moved into Cancer and Capricorn, and Saturn is within orb of its conjunction to Pluto, which occurs at 22 Capricorn 47 on January 12, 2020, and suggests an underlying theme that seems to be playing out. That is the corruption of the patriarchy. Much evidence of this is being brought to light for us to heal. So are there any questions or observations so far? Okay, ready for some correlations?
Ready.
Did you have a question, Wanda?
No, I was saying ready.
Oh, ready. Okay, ready. Okay, so tables seem to be the most efficient way to organize a lot of information on the players in this reality show that's playing out on the US stage. This one shows any conjunction, square, or opposition connections with some of the sensitive points previously mentioned. Also, for reference, at the bottom of the chart is that second Mercury retrograde conjunction with Jupiter, Sun, and Atlantis. The actual Mercury Jupiter conjunction was at 4 degrees Sagittarius 19 minutes, with Atlantis at 5 degrees Sagittarius 15 minutes, conjunct the Sun at 5 degrees Sagittarius 37 minutes. We saw earlier Trump Sr.'s chart with the eclipses contacting his Mars and Ascendant and transiting Chaos on his Gemini Sun. He also has natal Black Moon Lilith at 5 Sag 21, where the recent Mercury retrograde Jupiter conjunction with Atlantis occurred. The Trump Tower meeting has Mercury at almost 26 degrees Taurus, opposite Mars 26 Scorpio retrograde, square to the eclipse points. And then some of the other players involved. Robert Mueller, Venus 27 Leo, conjunct the American eclipse. Juno 6 Gemini, opposite the Atlantis Mercury Jupiter conjunction. Rob Goldstone, Uranus 26 Leo, Chiron 28 Aquarius, Mercury 24 Scorpio, Sun 11 Sag. Vladimir Putin, Black Moon Lilith 27 Leo 29. Moon 2 Gemini 55. Michael Flynn, a retired 3-star general whose military career spanned 33 years, and was briefly Trump's national security advisor, pleaded guilty to lying to FBI agents about his conversations with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, in the month after Trump's election. Flynn was fired by Trump after this information came out to the public. Flynn has Black Moon Lilith at 29 degrees Taurus, Pluto 4 Virgo, and Sun at 13 Sag. This is from a very long but most excellent article on apnews.com. Since Trump's victory in November, Flynn had become part of Trump's inner circle and the preferred contact between the Trump team and Russia. In late December, Flynn had asked Sergei Kislyak, Russia's ambassador to the U.S., to reject or delay a UN vote condemning Israeli settlements and impose sanctions on Russia for election meddling. Flynn implored Kislyak not to escalate a tit-for-tat fight over punishment imposed on Moscow for election interference. But on that Tuesday, when FBI agents asked Flynn about those conversations, he lied. No, he said, he hadn't made those requests of Kislyak. Quoting Chris Christie, who led the transition team after Trump was elected, in an interview on the recent release of a book about Trump, he says, "The president said to him, 'The Russia thing is all over now because I fired Flynn.' Mr. Christie said that he started laughing and the president asked why. 'Sir,' I said, 'this Russia thing is far from over.' Mr. Christie wrote. Mr. Trump responded, 'What do you mean? Flynn met with the Russians. That was the problem. I fired Flynn. It's over.' Mr. Kushner added, 'That's right. Firing Flynn ends the whole Russia thing.' Mr. Christie, who wrote that it all sounded naive, recalled Mr. Kushner telling him that he was crazy when he said they would most likely still be discussing the Russia issue in February 2018. And here we are in March of 2019, still talking about it. Here are Trump's close confidants, showing in red any connections in their chart to the early degrees of Sag or the August 27th, the 3 recent Mercury Jupiter conjunctions, but also the Mercury station direct point after the second conjunction. His associates all have something there. And there's been a whole lot of celestial activity in that area here lately. Rick Gates, Paul Manafort's partner, pleaded guilty to lying to federal investigators and conspiracy. He is assisting the special counsel in hopes of a lighter sentence. He has Neptune at 4 Sag 36 retrograde, opposite Saturn at 5 Gemini 42. We have a time for Manafort, so planetary positions for him are listed exactly. He was Trump's campaign manager and has been prosecuted in 2 federal courts. In August 2018, he was convicted on 8 charges of tax and bank fraud. A mistrial was declared on 10 other charges. He pleaded guilty last September to 2 conspiracy counts, and like a number of former Trump aides, agreed to cooperate with the special counsel's investigation. But after a lengthy closed hearing on February 13th, Judge Jackson agreed with prosecutors that Mr. Manafort had breached his plea agreement by lying to them about 3 matters. Manafort's Juno at 26 Taurus 47 had been squared by the eclipse on 27 Aquarius 08. Atlantis at 13 Gemini 47 is widely conjunct Trump's sun. Saturn is at 0 Virgo 05 retrograde, Chiron 8 Sag 59 retrograde, at the same degree as both the previously mentioned Mars retrograde point conjunct Antares in 2016 and the Mercury Jupiter conjunction in November 2018. The transiting nodes are square to his natal ones, and natal chaos will soon begin to feel that square from transiting Chaos in Gemini as well, if it hasn't already. Michael Cohen, Trump's former personal attorney and fixer, has Black Moon Lilith, 28 Aquarius, Sun 2 Virgo, conjunct Vesta, 4 Virgo. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and his senior advisor, has Uranus, 29 Scorpio, Vesta also at 4 degrees Virgo, like Cohen, but retrograde. We also have a time for Trump Jr., who has Pallas at 27 Scorpio 15 and Saturn at 0 Virgo 10, interestingly, 5 minutes away from Manafort's retrograde Saturn. First daughter Ivanka Trump, born 9 months after Kushner, also has Uranus at 29 Scorpio. Atlantis is 2 Sag, Mars 6 Virgo, Black Moon Lilith 8 Sag. Roger Stone, a political strategist known for his opposition research, like digging up dirt on someone, was recently indicted and arrested for obstruction of an investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. He has Mars at 29 degrees Scorpio or 0 degrees Sagittarius. We don't have a time for him, and Mars changed signs that day. Atlantis is at 25 degrees Cancer, where the North Node is right now. Sun at 4 Virgo, conjunct Black Moon Lilith at 8 Virgo. Now let's connect some key events to the Mercury-Jupiter conjunctions. This information I got from Sutori.com. It's called Timeline You Might Be Interested in. It has many more events than I've listed here and gives a very eye-opening picture of the man who occupies the White House. I've inserted eclipses and some of the events from the timeline into the list of Mercury-Jupiter conjunctions to illustrate the timeline of developing hubris in the administration. The conjunction of 520 Sun. The month before that, Preet Bharara, then U.S. Attorney for Southern District of New York, announced charges against a massive Russian organized crime ring operating out of Trump Tower. The month following, Trump announced that the Miss Universe pageant was to be in Russia, and a few months later, he praised Putin on Fox and Friends. The next conjunction fell on Trump's Atlantis in Leo. That year, Trump Taj Mahal was fined for money laundering. In 2015, the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction fell smack on Trump's Leo ascendant. That November, Felix Sater writes to Michael Cohen, stating that he'll get buy-in from Putin and that they'll engineer Trump's presidency. Now things start to get more interesting. Right before the Mars retrograde starts, Paul Manafort joins the Trump campaign. George Papadopoulos is in communication with a high-ranking Russian official in an attempt to set up meetings between the Trump team and Russian reps, with the promise that the Kremlin had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. On 9 June 2016, the occurred with Trump Jr., Kushner, Manafort, Goldstone, plus a number of Russians to discuss the dirt on Hillary. That day, Mercury at 25 degrees Taurus, 59 minutes, opposed retrograde Mars at 25 degrees Scorpio, 48 minutes. Both square and a little more than a degree from the coming eclipse in Aquarius. Mercury retrogrades later that year over Jupiter, and then after it turns direct, the third conjunction is right on Trump's progressed Neptune, bringing focus to his blurred boundaries in partnerships. 3 weeks later, Mother Jones reports, a veteran spy has given the FBI information alleging a Russian operation to cultivate Donald Trump. Kushner and Michael Flynn meet with Russian ambassador to U.S. Sergei Kislyak at Trump Tower. Okay, let's pause temporarily from the timeline and take a look at that Trump Tower meeting. Also from the AP News article, over email, Goldstone brokered a meeting between Trump Jr. and a Russian lawyer. He said the lawyer had documents that could incriminate Clinton, and they were being shared as part of the Russian government's support of the Trump campaign. Seems we have some time. And if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer, Trump Jr. wrote back. Here's the chart for the beginning of that meeting. 3rd house Pluto, 8th house Gemini. Keeping in mind Trump's sun at 23 Gemini, notice Atlantis conjunct the Gemini vertex, Sun and Venus conjunct Gemini Chaos. Mercury in Taurus opposite Scorpio Mars retrograde. At that time, Neptune in Pisces was conjunct the South Node, and Jupiter in Virgo conjunct the North Node, and Saturn was square to them both. Are there any comments or questions? Okay, if not, let's get back to the timeline. June 3, 2017, Trump fired Michael Flynn. A month later, Sessions fired Preet Bharara. Later in March, a lawyer for Putin foe Nikolai Gorokov was reportedly thrown from a window in Moscow. Gorokov was set to testify as a U.S. government witness in a money laundering case initiated by Southern District of New York, led by Preet Bharara. Also in March 2017, Mike Flynn asked for immunity. In May, Trump fires FBI Director James Comey. Subpoenas are issued to Michael Flynn by Senate Intelligence Committee. A closed-door meeting occurred in the Oval Office with Russians. Robert Mueller is appointed special counsel. In July, Paul Manafort's home was raided. George Papadopoulos was arrested. In August, the Great American Solar Eclipse was conjunct Atlantis at 4 degrees Virgo, 13 minutes, conjunct Mercury. The previously mentioned AP article puts these events into words. The deceptions played out as Mueller methodically brought criminal to the troll farm. He exposed Manafort's tax cheating and his illicit foreign lobbying, winning at trial and putting the 69-year-old political operative at risk of spending the rest of his life in prison. And one by one, his team got guilty pleas from Flynn, Papadopoulos, and others. In September of 2017, Richard Beckler, Trump's appointee as general counsel of the General Services Administration, dies. Beckler is the GSA staff member who'd assured Trump that requests for materials such as emails from special counsel would not be honored. On 10/18/2017 was the first Mercury Jupiter conjunction of the year, and it was in Scorpio. Events are really starting to heat up. That month, Papadopoulos' guilty plea was revealed. Manafort and Gates were both indicted and arrested. In December, Michael Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Trump learned that Mueller has in his possession all of their transition emails on the .gov domain obtained via the GSA. February 2017 saw the indictment of 12 Russians outlining their methods of election interference. Paul Manafort and Rick Gates were indicted again. In April, there was another Trump Tower fire. An art dealer dies. Michael Cohen texts Dennis Shields with a warning to get out. FBI raids Michael Cohen's home, hotel room, and office. In July 2018, a delegation of Republicans go to Moscow. Maria Butina's criminal complaint was unsealed. Trump, the day before the solar eclipse on 18 degrees Leo, 42 minutes, Dennis Shields, the same guy Cohen texted back in April, was found dead in Trump Tower. And days afterward, a mystery case before the grand jury was initiated. 10/2/2018, Jamal Khashoggi was murdered on orders from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Trump later disputes the findings of the CIA and stands with MBS, stating that too much money is at stake. Also that month, Project Lakta, the Russian election interference criminal complaint, is unsealed. John Bolton goes to Russia to meet with Putin. And the Week of Terror begins 10/22/2018 with bombs at CNN and the homes of George Soros, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Brennan, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Eric Holder, Maxine Waters, Robert De Niro, Joe Biden, Cory Booker, James Clapper, Kamala Harris, and Tom Steyer. It ends with a mass shooting at Tree of Life Synagogue on October 27th. 2 days after that, Mercury was conjunct Jupiter at 27 degrees Scorpio, 49 minutes, conjunct Atlantis. Just over a week later, Sessions resigned and was replaced by Whittaker, his former chief of staff. Eleven 2018, Mercury retrograde conjunct Jupiter conjunct Atlantis. That day, Corsi Stone involvement in WikiLeaks. 2 days later, Michael Cohen pleads guilty, says he's getting his freedom back. There was a massive raid at Deutsche Bank on 12/21/2018. Mercury was conjunct Jupiter for the third time last year on 9 degrees Sagittarius 35, the 2016 Mars retrograde point. And looking to the future, less than a year from now, on 1/2/2020, Mercury will conjunct Jupiter, 7 Capricorn 04, and on 1/12/2020, Saturn will be conjunct Pluto, 22 degrees Capricorn 47. Are there any observations? Am I still connected? I have a feeling I'm not.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I stopped the share because I all of a sudden I thought it seemed like I was not on. All right, I'll reshare my screen. Okay, I love that this AP News article addressing speculation that Robert Mueller may never publicly release a report after his investigation ends includes both words chaos and hubris. It says, Mueller has spoken loudly, if indirectly, in court, indictment by indictment, guilty plea by guilty plea. In doing so, he tracked an elaborate Russian operation that injected cash to help Trump win the White House. He followed a GOP campaign that embraced the Kremlin's help and championed stolen material to hurt a political foe. And ultimately, he revealed layers of lies, deception, self-enrichment, and hubris that followed. The day that article was released, 22 February 2018, transiting Atlantis in Capricorn had just passed over the south node of the moon. Robert Mueller's recent 800-page sentencing memo on Paul Manafort cited sentencing guidelines of up to 22 years for a wide-ranging conspiracy involving obstruction of justice, money laundering, hidden overseas bank accounts, and false statements to the Justice Department. He now faces the distinct possibility of going to prison for a very long time. Here's Manafort's natal chart with current progressions and transits. Transiting asteroid Chaos has been very close to his ascendant, but is now back in the 12th house, having already reached the ascendant once at around the time of the solar eclipse on 8/11/2018. Transiting asteroid Atlantis is conjunct his natal Jupiter and sextile natal Chaos, which is also being squared by transiting Chaos. Progressed Mercury is retrograde, having made a conjunction with progressed Sun in August of 2012, conjunct Atlantis. You can see right here. The day after the 2018 solar eclipse conjunct Manafort's third house Pluto with Chaos on his ascendant, this article was published about him. The rise and fall of Paul Manafort, greed, deception, and ego. It speaks to what was in conjunction with natal Atlantis. Prosecutors allege that between 2010 and 2014, Mr. Manafort was paid more than $60 million from his Ukrainian patrons and hid much of that income in secret foreign bank accounts in the names of 15 or more shell companies. He avoided paying taxes on at least 16.5 million of it, they allege. The remainder, they said, might be considered non-taxable business expenses, construed broadly enough to include $45,000 for cosmetic dentistry. Mr. Manafort used his tax-free dollars, prosecutors have said, to support a lifestyle of staggering extravagance. In 2012 alone, he bought 3 homes. Okay, we have no birth time for Michael Cohen, so this is a noon chart with a 0 degrees Aries ascendant. Natal asteroid Atlantis is conjunct his Mercury in Leo. The 8/11/2018 solar eclipse was exactly conjunct the midpoint of Atlantis and Mercury in Leo, which is trine to Chaos in Aries, where coincidentally Manafort's Sun is, and squaring progressed Uranus, progressed Saturn, natal and progressed Chiron. Since Chaos moves so slowly, transiting Saturn is square both natal and progressed Chaos, as Cohen is about to report to prison for 3 years. But first, he testified to Congress about his lies on behalf of the president. Unbeknownst to the public, Trump personal lawyer Michael Cohen had been trying to broker a business deal in Russia for the Republican candidate. The proposal was for a Trump Tower Moscow. A letter of intent was signed. Cohen had discussed it with Trump and his children. Cohen had even gone so far as to reach out to the Kremlin directly for help. Speaking with officials about ways to secure land and financing for the project. Months later, after Congress about the Trump Tower Moscow project, saying it ended much sooner than June 2016. Cohen would later say he was trying to be loyal to Trump and match the public messaging of a president who had adamantly denied any business dealings with Russia. Most recently, Mueller indicted Stone, accusing him of witness tampering and lying to Congress about his efforts to glean information about the WikiLeaks disclosures. Despite emails showing him repeatedly discussing WikiLeaks with Trump advisors and others, Stone told lawmakers he had no records of that sort. Stone has pleaded not guilty. Just weeks after the solar eclipse in August of 2018 on his south node conjunct Atlantis, President Trump's longtime advisor, Roger Stone, stated that he was next for Mueller and asked for donations to his legal defense fund. Indeed, he was indicted and arrested on 25 January 2019. Stone was charged with obstruction, witness tampering, and making false statements. You can see that the transiting North Node in Cancer is approaching his natal Atlantis, and transiting Chiron in Pisces was conjunct Chaos, which had moved back into Pisces by progression. I noted earlier that we don't have a birth time for Stone, and Mars changed signs the day he was born. This chart is for noon, placing Mars in the last minutes of Scorpio, but if he was born later in the day, it could be early Sagittarius. Progressed Mercury appears to be in early Sag, as was transiting Ceres the day of his arrest. Regardless of the sign Mars occupies, Chaos is trine with it, which seems fitting for a man who seems to thrive while always being right in the middle of chaos. And here we have Donald Trump. In addition to the 2017 and 18 eclipses across the horizon of his chart involving Mars, Chaos turned stationary direct yesterday on 23 degrees Gemini, 10 minutes, exactly conjunct Trump's sun and progressed Uranus is not far away. Transiting Jupiter and Chaos at 23 Sag and Gemini 11. This coming July, there will be a lunar eclipse in Trump's fifth house, opposite to his Venus-Saturn midpoint, followed by the Saturn-Pluto conjunction also in the fifth. Considering that the later two activations will take place in his house of children, and the fact that Junior and Ivanka have placements that connect to the Great American Eclipse point, it will be interesting to see if they become implicated in all of this drama. You can also see transiting Atlantis opposite his Venus with the North Node conjunct it, as Michael Cohen testified before Congress, where he talked about Trump's financial misdeeds. Notice also that Trump's progressed moon is approaching a conjunction to his 12th house Leo Mars. Could get even more interesting. Here's a very recent article from NewYorkTimes.com talking about the Trump-Kim summit that, again, is specifically using the word hubris to describe what had happened. In interviews with a half-dozen participants, it is clear Mr. Trump's failed gambit was the culmination of 2 years of threats, hubris, and misjudgment on both sides. Mr. Trump entered office convinced he could intimidate the man he liked to call Little Rocket Man with tough talk and sanctions, then abruptly took the opposite tack, overruling his aides and personalizing the diplomacy. This story is still being written. Every time I thought I was done with my presentation, I'd discover a new article or another correlation. At some point, I do have to declare it done and move on. So to that end, there are just a few more slides. This one last quote from that great AP News article talking about whether Robert Mueller will publicly release his report. In the backdrop of all of this is Trump and his family. Mueller's grand jury heard testimony from several participants of the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting arranged by Trump Jr., but no charges have been filed. The mercurial president himself has made no secret of his disdain for the Mueller investigation and his efforts to undermine it. Mueller has investigated whether any of Trump's actions constituted obstruction of justice, but the special counsel hasn't gone public with what he found. And it's unclear if he ever will. And one last set of correlations. On 3/4/2019, 2 days ago, transiting Venus was 04. August 2nd, 2014, Mercury had been conjunct Jupiter, 3 degrees Leo, 52 minutes, with Atlantis at 13 degrees Virgo, 33 minutes, square Manafort's Atlantis at 13 Gemini, 47. This is the place where he had the progressed Sun-Mercury conjunction to Atlantis in August of 2012. During the recent Mars retrograde in Aquarius, the 7/26/2018 Sun opposition Mars, marking the middle of the retrograde, was on 4 Leo and Aquarius 09. The 7/27/2018 total lunar eclipse was on 4 degrees Aquarius, 45 minutes. Trump's natal Atlantis is 5 degrees Leo, 30 minutes. From the timeline, July of 2018 was when the delegation of Republicans went to Moscow. Maria Butina's criminal complaint was unsealed, and Trump met with Putin in Helsinki, where the records of that meeting were destroyed. In addition, the sensitive point in the zodiac eerily recalls the 7/27/1939 Mars retrograde at 4 degrees Aquarius, 42 minutes, just over a month before World War II began. For years, Manafort worked for Viktor Yanukovych, a Kremlin protege who was deposed as president amid widespread demonstrations in 2014. And in early 2015 was when Trump Taj Mahal was fined for money laundering. And one more new article released the day transiting Venus was conjunct Atlantis. The House Judiciary Committee launched a broad investigation into Trump's inner circle Monday, targeting figures who have worked in his administration and for the Trump Organization businesses. The committee told reporters Monday that the investigation will focus on 3 primary issues: whether the president obstructed justice by interfering with criminalization of campaign and financial reporting laws, as well as possible misuse of office for personal gain, and abuses of power, to include misuse of the pardon power and attacks on the press, judiciary, and law enforcement agencies. And one interesting look to the near future, a WashingtonTimes.com article from a month ago had stated, a federal judge in Washington, D.C. on Monday pushed back the sentencing on President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, by about 1 week to March 13th. Manafort was scheduled to be sentenced on related but separate charges in Virginia. However, that sentencing was postponed by District Judge T.S. Ellis, who said he wanted to wait until the Washington allegations were sussed out. On 3/13/2019, transiting Jupiter in Sagittarius will oppose transiting Chaos at 23 degrees Gemini, 11 minutes, having turned stationary direct at 23 Gemini, 10. Donald Trump's sun is 22 Gemini, 56. Okay, this final chart shows the Saturn-Pluto conjunction as a transit to Trump's 5th house. exactly opposite 11th house Saturn conjunct Venus. Transiting Jupiter is opposed to natal Mercury, and transiting North Node is conjunct Mercury. Transiting Chaos in the 10th will be square natal 7 the 10th, also will be square his ascendant. Again, I wonder how his children will fit into the Pluto-Saturn-Venus story of Trump and friends that will be unfolding at that time. Questions or comments?
Wow, just fascinating.
I know, that's what I said. I said I have to share this.
So many correlations there, you know, as far as that fixed archetype being so activated.
Yeah, exactly. I know. So many of the that is on that 27 to 29 degrees Leo and Aquarius, Scorpio and Taurus. You know, it's incredible. I know it's a lot. I really thank you all for sticking with me and letting me share my latest obsession. Hopefully now I can slow down on the posting of all these events.
Well, we definitely appreciate you sharing. Are there any other questions?
This seems like it correlates to the fall of Atlantis, doesn't it?
It sure does. Sure does. With chaos involved.
Yeah, it's like Trump was part of the fall of Atlantis, and a lot of the people who are, you know, prominent right now.
Yeah,
that's part of it.
Yep, that's the feeling I got as I was doing this. It's like, wow.
Yeah, correlation for sure.
I wonder too, since he has all of that at that last, what is it, the third decan, which to me kind of seems like a Pisces, you know, mutable type, just within the archetype itself, because it's in those final degrees.
Right, and in its 12th house as well.
Yeah. So a doubling of the chaos.
Yeah.
Chaotic energy.
Exactly. And at that time at the time that he was born and when Manafort was born and when I was born, chaos was in Pisces.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now it's moved 90 degrees and is now in Gemini, right on his sun.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for all the work as well.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And a lot of information. Well, one last call for any other questions or comments.
What was that number for chaos again? I want to look that up.
195, let's see.
That's Atlantis.
Atlantis is 1198.
Oh, okay.
Chaos is 19521.
21.
Cool.
Thank you all.
If there are no other questions or comments, I guess we will wrap up the meeting here. Thank you again so much, Sue. Would you all please thank Sue Hillyard for a brilliant and information-packed meeting.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you all. See you next time.
Bye.